Wonderful. It's such a pleasure to be with you. Thank you so much for inviting me. As has been said, so I work down in England, but our charity does work across the UK and overseas as well. One of the really nice things about getting on the train and coming up to Scotland is I feel like I leave behind the kind of dark satanic mills of the Victorian English education system, which is becoming more Victorian by the moment. And it's wonderful to be thinking about the future and thinking about the future of skills and different things and different ways of working up here with you. I wanted to do a couple of things with you this morning. The first is to think about the shape of the skills shortages that already exist in our economy. We're absolutely right, this theme of, we can't predict everything that's going to happen. That's absolutely right, and I'll come on to say a bit more about that. But we can take a really hard look at what's going on in our economy at the moment and really understand what's happening, understand the shape and size of those skills shortages. So quick plug, we've started producing every term one of these skills shortage bulletins. I've got copies at the front, so do pop and see me at lunchtime if you'd like them. The idea really is to try and pick up where the UK Commission for Employment and Skills, which was dissolved by the Westminster government, left off in terms of bringing together information about the skills shortages. Now, privately, I rather think that the UK Commission for Employment and Skills was dissolved because the Westminster government didn't really want to know about the size of the skills shortages. But nonetheless, the data, the underlying data is still there, and it's our job and our responsibility to bring that out and to help understand that, both from a kind of analytical point of view and for the business and educating community. So there are two key things on this slide. One is skills shortages, the other is skills gaps. So skills shortages are vacancies in our economy which can't be filled because the employers can't find the skilled people they need. There are 226,000 of them in the UK. Now, youth unemployment stands around 450,000, so there's something that's not quite working there in the way that our education system and our employment system come together. And you'll see that that's grown really remarkably, so more than doubled since 2011. The other kind of thing on this slide is skills gaps. Skills gaps exist where people are employed, but employers report that they don't have the skills to fully do their role effectively. Now, the good news is that's going in the right direction, but there's still 1.3 million almost workers in our economy where employers are telling us that their workers don't quite have the skills they need. So again, that speaks really strongly to the point we've already heard around upskilling, about changing, and about resilience and adaptability. Just in case you don't believe me, let's look at a different data source and make sure that says the same thing. So the first came from the Employer Skills Survey, so that's the biggest employer survey in the world, 87,000 businesses across the UK. The second comes from the British Chambers of Commerce Quarterly Economic Survey. And again, you'll see a really strong upward trend there. So from about 50% to about 70% in both manufacturing and the service sector, businesses saying that they face recruitment difficulties because they can't find the skills that they need. But it's not really enough, it's not really helpful to know just the scale of the skill shortages. We need to understand the shape and the nature of them as well. One way of doing that is to look at the sectors. So again, across the whole of the UK, and I can provide this data broken down by country as well, but across the whole of the UK, this is a look at the areas where there are the greatest skill shortages. So this table is ranked in order of the density. So in construction, 36% of vacancies are skill shortage vacancies. People can't find the skills that they're looking for. And on the left-hand side, just to bring it into even more colour, is the sheer volume. So these are the numbers of skill shortages vacancies that are already existing in our economy. We also need to understand a bit about the shape in terms of levels as well. So the really strong skill shortages tend to be in managerial occupations, in specialist areas, skilled trades. Really interestingly, 17% in apprenticeships, though. We always think about apprenticeships as being snapped up, and I think having worked in apprenticeships in my previous role, there's something of a mismatch there as well. There are vacancies out there that are really exciting, but that for some reason are not being filled, and there's that kind of mismatch that we need to look at as well. One of the most dramatic things that we found through our research is the sheer cost of these skill shortages. The Open University has done some fantastic research in this area and looked at the cost that skill shortages bring to businesses in terms of increased recruitment cost, in terms of needing to pay above where they should be for workers, in terms of having to backfill vacancies. The figure they come up with is 6.3 billion as the cost annually of skill shortages to the UK economy. And it gets even scarier when you start to look at the GDP that we're collectively foregoing because we don't have the skills in place. One of the parliamentary reports looking at the digital economy suggested a figure of upwards of £60 billion of GDP foregone because we didn't have the digital skills that we needed to compete with other countries in the OECD and globally. As we've said, the B word already, it's probably going to come in every single presentation, but I think there are two key things that are going to drive even further growth in the skills shortages. The first of those is, of course, Brexit, and we're already seeing through things like the Migration Advisory Committee's work the challenges that that's placing on the economy. When we look at the employer surveys, around 40% of businesses who have skills shortage vacancies have tried to recruit abroad, and 90% of those that try to recruit abroad try to recruit from the EU. So if, as we expect to happen, depending on the nature of the deal, migration is curtailed or at least perceived to be curtailed, that presents a real challenge for those individuals who are already filling some of the skills shortage vacancies that exist within the economy. The second big challenge, of course, is the one that is the kind of bread and butter of what we're talking about today, and that's the Industrial Revolution and Skills 4.0. And that's where the kind of nature of unpredictability comes in. So let's turn from looking at what the skills shortage vacancies look like in the economy now. That's important for us to understand, to start to think about what the future holds and to start to think about how we might prepare best for it. I was over in DC a few months ago listening to and taking part in an event about apprenticeships globally. One of the speakers was Dr. Arias, who works for the World Bank. And I think what he has to say is really two things, and this kind of brings me on to the second half of my presentation. One is really to remind us that when we've tried to predict things in the past, we've been pretty poor at it. But I think there's a caveat to that, that there are some obvious areas where we can predict what's going to happen. Digital skills is an obvious example, and I'll explore a bit with you in a second about how far we can go with that. The other is to say, really, to pick up this theme that's come up several times already and say, what about those transferable skills? What about those meta skills, those timeless skills that are going to carry people through whatever industry looks like? So, to what extent can we predict? Well, I was over in Finland recently. They have a huge amount of emphasis on this prediction, element, not just in education, but across their economy. So, led by the Prime Minister's team, they have people in every department whose whole job is to be predicting the future, to be crystal ball gazers. There are 10 of them within the education department alone, and I met the team chief there. They go through this process with each of the industries in Finland to try to predict what's going to happen over the next 10 to 15 years. They take a group of about 20 industrialists, educationalists, experts through a series of facilitated workshops that look at how processes are changing, what that means for the industry, and then what that means for skills. That leads to changes in things like the planning of numbers going to college, but also directly to changes in the curriculum. So as business practice changes, so the curriculum changes to meet it. I thought that was fascinating. I think there's something that we could do to bring that back to the UK. When I got back, I talked to several industries and found that the film industry is actually starting to do this already. So through the kind of the Screen Industry Council, film, visual effects, TV, they're starting to do some work around skills prediction. So to bring in quarterly research, to bring in an annual look at the skills in that sector, and to bring together this core group of 20 individuals to try to understand what's happening and what's changing in that industry. And I really admire that. That's something that I'd like to see spread both in England and across the UK as a way to get industries together and start to think about predicting. So I think there is something there. We've got this really rich data source we mustn't let go of what's happened in the past, of the skills shortages in the economy at the moment, and we've got the amazing expertise of individuals in those industries. And if we harness all of those, we should start to get some sort of picture of the future. Never going to be perfect, of course. I do take issue slightly with the kind of figure that's gone around the education research world of 50, 60, 70% of children today are going to do jobs you've never heard of. I don't quite believe that everyone's going to be an underwater noodle chef or a space judge in 10 years' time. So I think we just have to take that with a pinch of salt and think, we can do some prediction and we can make some sensible judgments. Having said that, it's absolutely the case that we can't predict what's going to happen in the future, and uncertainty is something that we're going to live with, and it's going to grow. And we have to be ready for that. So what do employers tell us that they want along that theme? Well, their message is actually really, really consistent. This, again, is from the Employer Perspective Survey back in 2016, but I was reading the CBI research that was published this morning, and it says exactly the same thing. Employers want relevant work experience. They want English and math skills above academic qualifications. That seems to have fallen out of the heads of education ministers back in England, but it's something that we can certainly reflect on here, and I think comes up again and again from employers. We've done some primary research, and apologies, this is small on the screen, but it's in your packs as well. What we did was, every week it seemed that there was a different survey coming out here and abroad that looked at what skills employers wanted. All of that is really helpful, but what we wanted to try and develop was a kind of meta-analysis that brought all of that together into a single set of skills and behaviours that employers are looking for. Okay, so that was step one. And then beyond that, what we wanted to do was to do focus groups with employers to try to take that down to the next level. So as the presentation earlier made really clear, communications, problem solving, all going to be super important. But for an educationalist, how do we take that down to the next level of detail and understand specifically what elements of communication business today are looking for? And that's what we really wanted to do. And then we tested that through a survey of 600 teachers across the UK to try to understand where they saw those skills being developed, either within the classroom or more broadly within their school. So we'll be publishing the full details of that on the 22nd of this month, but I wanted to give you a flavour of that. I think what this really says is that, aside from any predictions that we can make, there is a huge amount of uncertainty out there. How are we best going to tackle that uncertainty? Well, we're going to best tackle that uncertainty by giving young people and adults who are retraining a broad set of skills that are very clearly developed and very clearly kind of pointed to by employers and have been very kind of consistent over the last 10 years. The themes of those and the strands of those are absolutely kind of set out in the research again and again, and they form the basis of the excellent Skills 4.0 model that exists here already and that I think we're looking to kind of build on and develop today. So I'm going to bring my talk to a close there, but I just wanted to say something about the next speaker. So last year, I met Robin when she spoke here. Since then, I've been out to San Francisco to see her and the work that Minerva have done, and vice versa. I think I know she's going to talk a bit about how this is going to be how this is put in place in Minerva, but I've seen firsthand what a difference it can make for kind of a really clear concentration on this. We had an amazing intern from Minerva over the summer who showed me in spades that they had all of these skills. And that went so well that we now have 5 interns working with us from Minerva, actually almost as many as the number of staff in our charity. So as an employer as well, albeit a small employer, I've seen really clearly how these kind of skills that employers tell us again and again that they want, when we instill them in a mindful way in young people at whatever stage their education is, they impress us again and again with their adaptability, with their resilience, and they're able to do amazing things in our workplaces. Thank you very much.